Bueno, buenas noches a todas y a todos. Antes que nada, perdón por la demora. Bueno, hemos estado, como habéis visto, hasta ahora conectándonos. Vamos a empezar con esta mesa abierta. Es la última de las conferencias de esta conferencia OIDP 2018. Como sabéis, el título de la sesión es Votemos la democracia directa en la teoría y en la práctica. Estamos hoy con David Altman y Donatella de la Porta. Tenéis, como en todos los casos, sus biografías en la página web, aunque estoy segura que muchas ya sabéis quiénes son, porque no es la primera vez que escuchamos hablar de ellas. Y bueno, la idea esta noche es, nos van a contar cada uno un poco sobre el trabajo que han hecho últimamente alrededor de la democracia directa, y luego vamos a tener un espacio de discusión sobre algunos de los puntos que saldrán en sus presentaciones. Y sin más, le doy la palabra a David para que comience.
Bueno, muchas gracias. ¿Se escucha o no escuchan nada?
No.
¿No? ¿Ahora? ¿No? ¿No? ¿Hola? 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 Muchachos, ¿qué tal? Es un placer estar con ustedes. Ahora sí. Bueno, ya empecé. Muchísimas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias, Donatella. Muchas gracias, Laura. Realmente es un gusto haber participado estos 2 días con gente de tantos lugares, tantos perfiles, tantos idiomas. Y bueno, sin más, entro a la presentación. Lo que vamos a hacer con Donatella, cada uno de nosotros va a hacer una presentación de unos 15 minutos aproximadamente y después vamos a un pimponeo. En esta oportunidad voy a presentar algunas ideas centrales de este libro que sale, si todo sale bien, publicado ahora en diciembre o en enero, que se llama Ciudadanía y la democracia directa contemporánea. Obviamente no voy a adentrarme con terrible detalle, pero sí dar algunas ideas de qué se trabaja. Quizás uno de los temas que estamos totalmente de acuerdo es que la representación como la conocemos tiene ciertas deficiencias, ¿verdad? En primera instancia, la representación, sea considerada esta un mal necesario, una necesidad técnica o un bien público, es una característica sine qua non de las democracias contemporáneas. Y eso es algo con lo cual vamos a tener que convivir por el tiempo futuro seguro. Sin embargo, y esto lo sabemos muy bien, tiene sus limitaciones. Sabemos que los partidos políticos tienen que atraer al votante mediano, y eso significa que muchas de las agendas no son específicas. Hay una pobreza ciertamente de alternativas en general justamente por este seguimiento al votante mediano, e inclusive, por más de que no lo hagan, esperamos de nuestros partidos, sea en un régimen presidencial o en un régimen parlamentarista o mixto, que haya una negociación para formar coaliciones de gobierno. Y si nosotros votamos al partido A por la razón 1 y el partido A entra a la coalición de gobierno, en cualquier régimen de gobierno contemporáneo, en cualquier democracia, y justamente lo que se negocia es la razón 1, bueno, obviamente tenemos una limitación frente a cómo nos van a representar, ni que hablar si estamos en el contexto de la oposición y si votamos a la oposición. Y justamente es aquí donde hay uno de los talones de Aquiles más importantes de la democracia contemporánea y de la representación contemporánea. Es para aquellos, justamente, para los cuales sus preferencias se pasan por alto, no se escuchan. Los partidos y el sistema político es literalmente irresponsable. Y el tiempo que pasa entre elección y elección es agonizantemente largo. Entonces, estos espacios interelectorales que tenemos en las democracias contemporáneas constituyen, de acuerdo a mi visión, uno de los eslabones más débiles de los regímenes democráticos. De hecho, uno podría afirmar que un día de gobierno cada 4 años tiene mucho un aire a placebo. Y aquí les pongo fotos que fui levantando de diversas demostraciones populares importantes y masivas que han habido en distintas democracias contemporáneas. Bueno, tenemos arriba a la izquierda, obviamente la identifican, tenemos las manifestaciones de Brasil por los precios del transporte, la revolución del Candlelight Revolution en Corea, en Turquía, en Grecia, en reacción a la Troika, manifestaciones en Chile, particularmente liderados por el movimiento estudiantil, al principio secundario y después universitario, Rumania, Taiwán, Israel, etc. En cada uno de estos lugares han habido demostraciones porque hay algo que no estaba funcionando. Entonces, yo argumento de que hay muchas voces, entre ellos muchos de nosotros, creen que tenemos que hacer una transformación en cómo funciona la representación. Y aquí vamos con estas voces que dicen que deberíamos transitar hacia mecanismos de democracia directa. Ahora, hay que definir a qué nos referimos con democracia directa. Yo entiendo por mecanismos de democracia directa a un grupo de instituciones políticas donde los ciudadanos deciden o emiten su opinión en las urnas a través del sufragio universal y secreto y que no forma parte del proceso electivo regular de autoridades. Es una definición muy amplia, por cierto, ¿verdad? Aquí estamos hablando del sufragio universal y secreto. Pero si estamos de acuerdo con esta definición tan amplia, tenemos que reconocer que hay ciertas cosas que no entran en el mundo de la democracia directa, lo que no significa que no debamos estudiarlas, analizarlas o siquiera tenerlas como un horizonte querible. Pero no hay sufragio universal y directo en en escenarios de democracia deliberativa, presupuesto participativo, asambleísmo, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Tampoco incluyo al recall, por más de que en varios paneles se cree que el recall, acá la literatura está claramente dividida en dos partes iguales, aquellos que incluyen el referéndum revocatorio o recall en inglés en el mundo de la democracia directa y aquellos que no. Yo no lo incluyo porque es como un corolario, de acuerdo a mi entender, un corolario del proceso eleccionario de autoridades. Cuando hablamos de mecanismos de democracia directa, también es importante señalar de que esto es una familia institucional, hay diversos tipos de mecanismos. Y aquí simplemente les muestro, se ve bien, los grandes 4 tipos que yo identifico para entrarle a este mundo de los mecanismos de democracia directa. El primero que ven a la izquierda son los referéndums obligatorios. Estos se dan en muchísimas democracias contemporáneas donde, frente a una reforma constitucional, automáticamente se dispara un voto popular donde los ciudadanos decidimos si sí o si no se acepta este cambio, por ínfimo que sea. Por más que sea una coma, por ejemplo, en el Uruguay, tenemos este cambio de una coma tiene que ser aprobado directamente por la ciudadanía. Lo mismo ocurre en Suiza, no solamente en el ámbito federal, sino que en el ámbito cantonal, así como en todos los estados de Estados Unidos, con la excepción del estado de Delaware. No se puede hacer una alteración sin el voto directo de la gente. Moviéndonos un poquito hacia la derecha, vemos lo que denomino los plebiscitos opcionales. Y acá es donde entramos a un mundo más turbio de la democracia directa, desde mi entender, el mundo de lo que viene de arriba hacia abajo, el mundo plebiscitario. Esto es cuando una combinación de autoridades, un primer ministro o legisladores o alguna combinación de legislativo y ejecutivo proponen a la ciudadanía decidir sobre cierta materia o emitir su opinión sobre cierta materia. A mí los que más me interesan para estudiar, y de esto se trata este trabajo, son aquellos que están los dos más a la derecha, el referéndum y la iniciativa popular. Debo aclarar en este preciso instante que al no haber una terminología universal sobre los mecanismos de democracia directa, yo me estoy adaptando a la terminología suiza partiendo de la base que cualquier persona que estudia la democracia directa tiene que estudiar a Suiza o tiene que conocer a Suiza para conocer un poco más por el impacto relativo que ha tenido este caso de estudio. El referéndum, en este contexto entonces, me refiero a aquel voto popular directo donde los ciudadanos revisamos una ley recientemente aprobada y nos damos la libertad de rechazarla, por más de que esta aprobación en el Poder Legislativo haya sido por unanimidad. Los ciudadanos se reservan esa ventana de oportunidad para poder eventualmente rechazar una legislación. Y la iniciativa popular es todo lo contrario, es cuando promovemos un cambio constitucional o un cambio legal. Obviamente estas dos últimas instituciones que he mencionado, hay toda una serie de procedimientos que en un ratito los vamos a ver, que es recolección de firmas, de cierto porcentaje del electorado, en cierto tiempo específico, etc. Sobre casos específicos, acá es donde viene la cosa interesante, yo creo. Usualmente las motivaciones que hay atrás de los plebiscitos tienden a ser de 4 tipos. En una primera instancia, uno podría pensar de que estos recursos se usan como un mecanismo de lavado de manos, ¿no? ¿Saben lo que? Esta decisión es demasiado complicada, ustedes decidan el asunto. Clásico, Brexit. Bueno, no Brexit. El mejor de los casos son los plebiscitos de integración a la Unión Europea. ¿Entramos o no entramos a la Unión Europea? Es tan costoso y es tan difícil, ¿saben? Se los regalo. Ustedes deciden qué hacemos. El otro ejemplo es, quizás más importante, es la hiperlegitimidad que se quiere hacer frente a un cambio grande, un cambio que usualmente son los poderes ejecutivos que buscan una suerte de aura de gloria popular y legítima. Y acá tenemos el caso quizás más famoso en los últimos años en nuestra América Latina del plebiscito sobre el proceso de paz en Colombia. Plebiscito que, por cierto, fracasó, podríamos charlar un poco después. Entonces, es la hiperlegitimación de una política específica. Y después vienen los usos de estos mecanismos que tienden a ser más de desempate, ¿no? O porque hay un conflicto en el poder ejecutivo, y ahí sí entra el caso de Brexit. Acá estamos hablando de un conflicto en el Partido Conservador británico, donde habían 2 grandes facciones, y para resolver este cortocircuito se llama a la ciudadanía. O la otra posibilidad, que quizás en América Latina es la más fácil de entender y más fácil de ver, es cuando un poder trata de esquivar a otro poder. Usualmente es el poder ejecutivo el que trata de esquivar al poder legislativo, y acá tenemos el voto popular que se nos viene en un par de semanas en Perú bajo el presidente Vizcarra. Los de abajo, en cambio, las motivaciones son 2 distintas. Uno es por pecados de omisión, ¿no? La iniciativa popular es porque no nos escuchan, y los otros por comisión, porque hicieron algo que nosotros ciudadanos no queríamos. Simplemente para darles una idea de lo que ha pasado en el mundo, aquí hablo de 2 gráficos donde tenemos los mecanismos de democracia directa en el ámbito nacional, no estoy hablando en el ámbito local en este momento. Entonces, en el gráfico de la izquierda ven la cantidad de países con el potencial legal de disparar mecanismos de democracia directa en las manos de los ciudadanos, perdón que el acronismo me quedó en inglés, desde 1900 al día de hoy. Vemos que hay 2 grandes momentos en la historia de los últimos 120 años, que es el periodo de entreguerras, acá la República del Weimar tuvo un rol fundamental, y el colapso de la ex Unión Soviética. Cuando hablamos de ocurrencias de mecanismos de democracia directa, la línea negra fuerte justamente habla de que hay un incremento estadísticamente significativo en los usos, acá no es el potencial, sino el uso directo de estos mecanismos en el mundo desde principios del siglo XX. Ahora, el diablo está en los detalles, esto lo sabemos cualquier persona que trabaja con instituciones, esto es lo primero que se aprende, ¿no? El detalle de cómo diseñamos las instituciones tiene un efecto directo sobre quién, cómo y por qué va a usar esta institución. Y acá voy a mencionar simplemente algunos. El peaje de entrada es muy distinto si para hacer una iniciativa popular o un referéndum necesitamos el 1 o el 2%, como se requiere a nivel federal en Suiza, a que si se requiere el 25% para un referéndum en Uruguay o el 10% para una iniciativa popular. ¿Quién lo va a usar? Evidentemente va a depender de ese numerillo tan fácil que es, tan chiquito que puede ser, va a determinar quién lo puede usar, si pequeñas asociaciones o grandes corporaciones, sindicatos, etc. Los tiempos de circulación de las peticiones para firmar por un referéndum o por una iniciativa popular, quién redacta la pregunta, cómo se calendariza, muchas veces se juntan a las elecciones generales inmediatas que vienen después, pero bajo el riesgo de presidencializar el referéndum, o se lo separa, pero eso tiene un costo muy importante para los países con pocos recursos. Si hay temas que no pueden ser incluidos, si diseñamos quórums de aprobación, de administración, supermayorías o de aprobación, ¿quién financia? ¿Es el Estado el que debe velar para que las 2 partes interesadas tengan un financiamiento acorde y equilibrado y que haya una campaña justa? ¿Cómo se vota propiamente? Una de las cosas que a mí personalmente más me apasiona de la democracia directa es justamente lo que llamo una existencia paradojal de la misma. En Suiza, cuando se realiza un voto popular y directo, ya es un signo de un fracaso del acuerdo. Y esto lo mencionó mi colega Janina Welpe en un par de oportunidades. Justamente uno de los grandes secretos de la democracia directa es que sirve como un mecanismo de amenaza a las instituciones representativas. Justamente porque me pueden hacer un referéndum si apruebo una ley de esta naturaleza, o me pueden hacer una iniciativa popular si ignoro constantemente a un grupo de interés o a un grupo ciudadano, es que justamente lo que se hace es se convoca a las partes interesadas y se trata de negociar. Para ser dicho de otra forma, ¿no le llama la atención que en sus respectivos barrios Suiza y Uruguay sean las democracias donde estos mecanismos de democracia directa son más desarrollados y más usados sistemáticamente, siendo que los mecanismos de democracia directa son una institución esencialmente mayoritaria donde un voto determina si sí o si no algo? Bueno, justamente se da en los países más consensuales y justamente, y acá viene la paradoja, porque tenemos estos mecanismos, es que hay una necesidad, que así entienden las élites políticas, de negociar preventivamente. ¿Por qué los mecanismos de democracia directa sirven como una innovación democrática? Bueno, básicamente yo creo que aumentan y maximizan los 4 principios de la democracia, de la tradición democrática, que es la libertad, la igualdad, la soberanía y el control. Democratizan la democracia y en cierto sentido la discusión que tenemos hoy con la democracia directa se asemeja muchísimo a las discusiones que habían a principios del siglo XX con la extensión del sufragio a la mujer o a los sectores más pobres de la sociedad. Los mismos argumentos que se dicen hoy en día contra la democracia directa son los que se usaron a principios del siglo XX. La gente emite votos irresponsables, no saben realmente lo que quieren. Bueno, se puede hacer un paralelismo casi perfecto. Se asume, y acá es otra de las diferencias que tengo con otras de las innovaciones democráticas, es que las personas no se asume que la gente es necesariamente buena o que busca fines altruistas. La gente es gente. Pues, es más, la gente puede tener ambiciones contradictorias, pasiones, y no es necesario esto para que funcione la democracia directa. Y no es paternalista, por cierto, ya que la acción de estas instituciones de democracia directa justamente no depende del beneplácito de autoridad alguna, no se le pide permiso a nadie y nadie tiene que decidir si esta iniciativa sigue adelante o no. No, esto sí es legal, o sea, si cumple con los mandatos básicos del sistema legal del país, se va adelante por más de que todas las autoridades están en contra. Rápidamente esta slide la dejo para después. Algunas reflexiones finales. Yo desafío las visiones convencionales que contraponen a la democracia directa con la democracia representativa. De hecho, yo creo que los mejores brillos de la democracia directa, justamente en la mano de los ciudadanos, es justamente y paradójicamente cuando no la vemos. Es que como mecanismo de amenaza avanzaron lo suficiente para cambiar las conductas de las élites políticas. Sirven como una herramienta de sincronización entre las élites y los ciudadanos. Fuerzan a una conexión en el sistema de partidos, aceitan al sistema de partidos. No se pueden desconectar. Asimismo, en caso de que tengamos un referéndum o una iniciativa popular, sirven como una válvula de escape a la presión cívica, a la presión social. En última instancia, y acá parafraseando a Norberto Bobbio, los mecanismos de democracia directa no son para hacerlos todos los días, sí son una herramienta que está todos los días existiendo. Entonces, son herramientas extraordinarias solo para circunstancias extraordinarias. Y voy a terminar con la misma slide de las fotos. Acá hay algo que sí tenemos que tomar en consideración. En ninguno de estos países donde estas grandes mega demostraciones ocurrieron, los ciudadanos tenían la posibilidad de disparar o un referéndum o una iniciativa popular. Yo no digo que justamente por eso se hayan hecho las demostraciones, sino que esto no deja de llamar la atención que no ocurre en aquellas sociedades donde existen estos mecanismos. Como dice Adam Przeworski, en las elecciones los ciudadanos somos omnipotentes, entre las elecciones somos impotentes. Muchas gracias. Listo.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I cannot hear. Yes. I'm also very grateful for this invitation and this possibility to present my work, which is resonant with what David said until now, but it is in another language, not only because I'm talking English, but also because I came to look at instruments and devices of direct democracies, looking at the ways in which civil societies and social movements developed, and noticing that this type of mechanism of direct democracies became more and more important in different geographical areas as some of the repertoires of actions that progressive social movements have used. And to a certain extent, as I'm going to say, it was a bit of a surprise to see this because they are resonant with some elements that progressive social movements tend to support, but they are also, for the majoritarian logic that it is implicit in this type of instruments, they tend also to challenge some elements and enter in tensions with some progressive aims of the movement themselves. So what I tried to do implicitly and explicitly is to compare direct democracies with two conceptions of democracy which have been very widespread among progressive social movements. David has addressed representative democracies, which of course to a certain extent has been also claimed for by many movements that asked always to enlarge the numbers and categories of people that could vote. But social movements are more characterized by an emphasis on other two dimensions. One is the dimensions of participation. So I agree with David, elections which are at the basis of legitimations of representative democracies are quite rare and not sufficient as instruments of legitimacy for some type of politics that has to be conducted also between the long space which the long intervals between one elections and the others. So what social movements have been claiming is always create new space for direct forms of participation through involvement, channels of participation for the people. Second things that social movements have been usually critical of is exactly the logic of voting, and social movement have explicitly very often said we have to aim for creation of discursive agreement in which democracy is not only counting votes and it is not only considering how heavy some types of preferences are in comparison with others, but it is exactly the process of developing this type of preferences. So social movements very often have not only emphasized participations, but they've also emphasized the creations of spaces for discussing, for high deliberative qualities usually are related with capacity of discussing different type of opinions in high quality discursive assemblies and other type of devices. So I'm looking at, in this book, at some specific types of referendums. There are as many types as referendums as there are types of elections, as David mentioned, but I'm not going to look at one of his categories, but rather at what happens when referendums are very much participated by social movements. So I've constructed these concepts of referendums from below to refer to specific categories of referendums in which referendums are often called directly from citizens, but also they tend to use different forms of actions, not just the normal electoral campaigns, but also very often protests in the streets and creations of alternative public spheres. And also referendums in which the aim is empowerment and emancipation of the people. So these are some characteristics of an ideal typical definitions that I tried with other colleagues to look at more in details in three types of referendums campaigns in which there was large participations of the people. The Catalan case of non-formalized, non-recognized referendums in plural is one of the cases that we looked at. The Scottish referendums of independence is another case that we looked at. Also a case in which there was a lot of participation by the people, even if the referendums was called top-down. And another case which is more near to the ideal typical definitions is referendums against the privatizations of water supply in Italy. And this was a case in which referendums was directly inspired by the World Social Forum and then the European Social Forums, and privatizations of water was considered as the most symbolic examples of the deprivation of people of rights to the commons, of human rights, and of the possibilities to decide about public issues and public commons. So these are empirical cases that we looked at, and one of the aims was to try to understand also under which conditions civil societies participate and which type of effects the participations of the people have on the type of paradoxes that David has presented. So we can say that referendums have limits and opportunities for progressive movements and progressive institutions as well. And my claim is that the capacity of referendums to play an emancipatory and empowering role is related to the capacity of peoples, citizens, civil societies, and social movements who intervene in them to combine direct democracies with both participatory and deliberative type of qualities of democracies. So not all referendums are progressive, but the type of capacity of social movements to intervene in the process is related with some conditions, specific conditions that we have studied in these three cases, and also allows us to reflect better, I think, on the ways in which direct democracies can represent a channel that increases participation and high-quality discursive democracies, but could also work in the other directions, creating some problems that movements can have difficulties in addressing. So what we saw is that in the cases I mentioned, the referendums that were able to involve a large part of the population, so high level of participation, and which were also able to develop multiple arenas for debate, so that even if people didn't agree on the solutions for the problems they saw, but the quality of the electoral campaigns was high and allowed people to understand more about the issues, have been, influenced by some contextual characteristics. So the claim is referendums from below as referendums in which civil society and social movements are more capable of raising, empowering type of claims, are usually characterized by the existence of mobilized movements. So referendums are very often one among many instruments which are used by social movements, and sometimes they are used at the end of a long process in which other type of instruments has been trial and tested, other forms of protest, and the referendums is one among them. Then there is the presence of some catalyzing events. So movements are important during the electoral campaigns because they succeed in creating attentions around referendums, and the type of institutional opportunities for direct democracies is also important in opening or closing possibilities to use these instruments. We have, that is, also multiple type of strategies in which referendums may be embedded. And I want to say just a few words on what is resonant in referendums in the sense that they can be combined with progressive visions of participation and deliberation in democracies, and which are the challenge instead. So resonance, very often referendums and popular initiatives are chosen by movements because they resonate well with the preference for participation of the people. They allow for direct expressions of people's opinions. They help opening new spaces. So what research on referendums said is that often referendums campaigns are more open than normal elections because they leave more space free for the formations of identities rather than interventions from above, from political parties and other actors. They open, that is, also possibility for deliberations. Very often at the beginning of the process, the citizens know little about some decisions to be made, but they can learn during the process. And in fact, what social movements tended to do in referendums from below was to try to develop spaces for debating issues on which people disagreed, but on which they could achieve higher level of information and mutual understanding. And they reflect the positive visions that David was mentioning before. So direct democracies is the opposite of technocratic ways of addressing the type of democratic malaise. They implies trust in the people, that the people are not ignorant and emotionally driven, but that they can learn about processes. But there are also some tensions. One is exactly this majoritarian logics. Citizens and civil society organizations are just some of the actors that intervene in a referendum campaigns. Other actors can be more powerful. Social movements often tend to develop new ideas, and they need to build gradually consensus. So referendums could also be very risky. On issues like same-sex marriage, for instance, referendums happened in Ireland and were successful for the movements who supported the process, but could be very risky in other type of environment. There is also the potential for other actors to intervene. Money counts in the campaigns, and they can be quite polarizing. In many of these cases, the referendums implies also the building of divisions that for some social movements could be quite dangerous to address later on. Final 1 moment slides, 1 minute slides. We saw that referendums tended to develop, referendums from below, in times of crisis. And this is also an observation which has been made by scholars who studied referendums in general. It is the use of referendums could have a constitutional capacity of recreating ideas of the people, of developing new forms of consensus, but it is also a sort of answer to the crisis that is very much also embedded in all the challenges that crises bring about with themselves. So what we saw is that referendums, especially referendums from below, has been perceived as type of mechanism that could respond to the challenges to representative democracies, that could be useful, as it was the case in Italy with the referendums against the privatizations of water supply, a way to develop a debate about citizenship rights themselves, and it could be a way to reconstruct legitimacy for forms of democratic participations. But it is at the same time moment of crisis are also moments which are difficult to address by movements themselves, and this is why I think it is important to reflect on the conditions under which referendums have an empowering and emancipator capacities, and the conditions under which they are challenges for social movements that have to be handled with a lot of care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to continue the debate in English, so it's easier for both of our speakers. So in listening to what you were saying, on the one hand, David was mentioning that in certain places, and he was referring to the images that were in the presentation, mobilization occurred because there was no possibility of direct democracy, of voting about certain issues. And Donatello, on the other hand, was talking about how mobilization was the source of this referendum. So the general question would be, is mobilization necessary for direct democracy? And the reason why this question makes sense, I guess, is it seems that the promise of direct democracy and referendums is that you allow citizens to have an individual voice on certain issues. But then it seems that it's connected to mobilization in different kinds of ways. So according to you, what is the role of, in general, not only in the cases that you were mentioning, but in general, what is the role of organized civil society in connection to these devices, or under which conditions the relationship works in a certain way? And also, what is the role of individual citizens that are not mobilized or don't even want to be mobilized in certain contexts?
Should I answer that?
I don't know.
Look, I think that there is a tension between, we agree on many things, but there is some sort of a tension between what she understands by participation and what I understand by participation, or mobilization, if you wish. It is interesting that when you see that these procedures are acted more frequently, you don't need such amount of mobilization. I mean, many times mobilization is a signal of a weakness. And if you have the power, you don't need to have a huge demonstration cutting the main avenues of the city. You just gather signatures. Of course, you need mobilization for that, for gathering the signatures. And you need civil associations, unions, political parties. I mean, we can't understand direct democracy without a healthy party system. We need a healthy party system. Because even in Switzerland or in Uruguay or wherever it exists, I won't say most of the time, but in extremely high amounts, citizen MDDs, mechanisms of direct democracy, are used also by political parties or unions or civil society. So I see mobilization and participation as a mean, not as an end by itself. I understand participation sometimes as something necessarily, but not required for having freedom and equality. If you can gather the enough amount of signatures to trigger and to change the status quo or to propose a new idea, that's perfectly fine. I mean, why you need to throw, like in Chile, Molotov cocktails in order for the state just to look at your demands? Because there is no other way. I mean, you have to make an important demonstration for the state to cut your eye. So yeah, organized civil society is always behind MDDs, mechanisms of direct democracy. It's extremely hard to think that an individual citizen can gather the signatures. Even in Switzerland, where the threshold is extremely low, you need machines. You need unions, you need NGOs, you need political parties. So in that regard, yes, you need some sort of organization behind the referendums or the popular initiatives. But again, participation is not an end by itself, at least from this perspective. I mean, participation is crucial in the electoral, in the way you vote at that poll. But that's my first stance, I would say.
Yes.
Sorry. Just one comment. I mean, in Uruguay, we had huge amount of MDDs, for instance, against the nationalization of water about 10 years ago. There was no demonstration in the street. And we nationalized the water, which was in private hands, now it's in the Constitution. And there was no need to cut the main avenue of the city. I mean, there was no need. I mean, you gather the signatures, you discuss. It penetrates homes, clubs, pubs, everywhere. What are you going to vote? I don't know. So there is a lot of quasi-experiments of deliberation, but you don't need 10,000 people in the street or 100,000. There's no need.
Okay, so we're talking about different kinds of mobilizations.
Absolutely.
Then, right?
Well, probably.
So the one would be the mobilization you need to gather signatures,
Sure.
or to get your proposal approved in
Correct.
a referendum, and another one to criticize
Correct.
government or a certain policy. Okay.
Well, I have a different point of view because I look from another perspective, especially in the sense that I think that you don't need participation in referendums. There are also referendums which are very top-down. But I think that in order to have good quality referendums or referendums that enhance democracies, the process is important. So in the Catalan case, el process was defined as important for the development of identities, solidarity linkages, and so on. I don't think that social movements are the only way. So I think that probably when you talk about parties in many cases in Latin America or in Europe in the past, parties acted also as instruments of creating channels of participation for the people, creating arenas for debate, and so on. But what happens when these parties, like in Europe, no longer exist as institutions which are capable of allowing for the linkages between the society and those in government to develop? Parties are no longer institutions in which people debate. So in this case, I think social movements have also emerged as actors that have to develop this important element of democracy. So I think that's one of the important things in the developments of these referendums we studied, so referendums from below, is that they offer the possibilities for people to get informed, get real opinion about any issues, and exchange information. And what happened during this process that we observed was the creation of organizations, the participations of also of small groups that were formed just with the aim of participating in the campaign. In the case of the Italian referendums on water supply, a lot of spontaneous type of initiatives developed with citizens participating in these campaigns. So I think that participations and mobilizations is not necessary to have referendums, but it helps to make the referendums really empowering,
sure.
like in this style. So maybe we don't disagree so much.
Not so much.
But I wanted to point also, because I think that we will discuss this in when addressing another question, so I don't want to go in details in this. But I think that when we assess was this referendums campaign, was this specific type of decisions empowering or not for the people, what counts is not only the final who won, but it is all the process. So we will go more in depth with this, but I think the process counts.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning, actually both of you mentioned this at the beginning as well, the relationship between, or at least the distinction between direct democracy and deliberative democracy. But then the question of the issue of deliberation comes up. And I was wondering what your opinion is on the relationship between these two forms of democracy. I know, so Donatella, you were mentioning the potential of these mobilizations and referendums for deliberation. And I know David hasn't mentioned this, but I know he also thinks about the risks of deliberation in certain contexts. So, and I was also thinking that this morning, for instance, at one of the roundtables, John Gastill was talking about citizen initiative reviews. It's a device that it's a formal process that combines the two kinds of democracy, right? So before a referendum, there's a deliberation with citizens chosen by lot that reflect upon the topic and produce conclusions and consult experts and things like that. So I'm not only thinking about formal devices, but your general opinion about the relationship between these two logics of democracy, the one of deliberation and one of voting, that is normally associated with the risk of polarization, but also in the case of deliberation. So, I don't know, it's a complex question. I just
multidimensional.
Exactly. So, whatever you want to comment around that relationship that goes far beyond the theoretical distinction between the two.
I think that's also here, it depends a lot on what one understands under deliberative democracy. There are very different understandings from the one more oriented towards defining deliberative only the use of some rational type of discourses, and those instead criticizing the theories a la Habermas tend to introduce elements of emotional participations, but also there are very different type of understanding of deliberation in the model of the citizens' juries and in the model of, let's say, participatory budgeting. In the social movements, very often what has been experimented with is assembly models. And often in this the empirical device, you have a mix of different logics. And deliberation, I think, is compatible with referendums in as far as you have during the referendums the creations of spaces for debating issues. Sometimes could be articulated formally with the model of citizen juries, but it could be also spontaneous, as in the cases that we have analyzed. So the multiplications of moments of discussions of important issues. Research on referendums says that the quality of deliberation during the referendums campaigns varies a lot, because it could be related with the issues. Some issues do not facilitate broad debate. It could be related with the interest at playing. So on some issues, you have a lot of fake news, for instance. So if we think about the deliberative qualities of the referendums I mentioned, we can compare them, we should compare them also with lack of deliberative qualities in processes like the Brexit referendums. So I think in theories, they are intentions because referendums end up with the majoritarian voting. In practices, they can be combined if there are multiple actors also in the civil societies that exploit the moment of the referendums as a moment of focusing attentions on some type of issues, as it was the case with the water referendums. What it is sure is that referendums are stronger on one dimensions on which citizenship juries are very weak, and it is the empowering capacities. So citizens juries are an interesting type of device in order to see how people would decide and argument if they had informations and so on. But they involved small numbers of people, and what the citizenship juries decide is not what eventually the institutions do. Instead, referendums is empowering in the sense that very often, even if then there are stories of what different actors do after the referendums, but at least they achieve decisions which could be favorable for the movement. So referendums in Ireland on same-sex sex marriages has introduced the same-sex marriage. Referendums in Italy on divorce has allowed to defend this type of citizenship rights. So I think that there is a trade-off.
Sure. I think we agree in most of the points, but you know, if we speak from a theoretical, at least from political thoughts, there is a huge tension between direct democracy and deliberation. Because most, starting with Habermas and many others, there is an implicit assumption that there is one truth. And through the deliberative process, we're going to find that truth, right? I understand society as a combination of conflicting interests. So sometimes we can't find any consensus or the truth. Let's say gay marriage, abortion, all these post-material debates are that go extremely to the beliefs in the la tripa, I don't know how to say
Guts.
that, in the guts, right? I mean, probably there is no way to find a consensus. And for the deliberative democracy perspective, the mere fact that we solve an issue by one vote, we might solve it by one vote, it means the absolute failure of this deliberative process. But I agree with Donatella, there is some ways to combine the best of both worlds. And the Oregon citizens' juries that you were just mentioning and John Gastill today was explaining about, it's one of the ways. You are strengthening the process of deliberation, at least in one regard, in order to make citizens more aware about the real intent of the questions that are posed in the ballot. Now, I am more in general perspective, a little bit more suspicious of deliberative process. Because in some ways, I find them extremely classist and conservative ways of imposing standard ideas of whatever topic. Just to give you an idea, there is a huge literature in the American judicial system about people's juries. You know, people also chosen by lot. And there is robust statistical evidence that most of the decisions taken represent better the white, highly educated, Protestant male, and usually the oppositions of the minority groups, blacks, Latinos, women, are in much weaker position. Why? Because as Lynn Sanders said in her famous article, Against Deliberation, that's the title, we have huge, different amount of cognitive resources. So yeah, most of us, we are academicians or people working in governments, and we are most likely highly educated, blah, 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 so we can understand each other, and we can, but that's not the truth of society. I mean, society, we have everything, and then I see that sometimes the weakest link is the first one that breaks in this democratic innovation. So I say, okay, to some control aspects of deliberation, but we can solve society problems through deliberative means. So that's why I'm saying, some aspects of the deliberative process are fantastic, like those. I go even further. In my work that I underline, that I show you before, I propose a citizen commission, also randomly selected, to propose an alternative to the question that is proposed by the original group. It's one step further than the Oregon's initiative. I think that will enrich the options that citizens have. We will have more options for sure, and we'll have a huge discussion because we are monitoring that process. So yeah, I take some parts, but I leave other parts.
I see you. Do you want to comment on that, or?
No, I agree with him because I agree with David because I think also that some of these mechanisms have to be combined. So we discussed with several colleagues about democracy by lot. Now it's that is by sortition, and of course it has some advantages. Also, it implies trust in the citizens, which I think is normatively and empirically correct things to do, but needs combinations with other things. So, for instance, in the cases we studied, I stressed the point of the importance of mobilized movements, because it is not only the referendums campaign that is sufficient to struggle against the fact that, in fact, referendums, as other elections, are situations in which rich and powerful interests have more chances. So it is a choice that implies risks. But in some cases, it has been a choice that allowed, even when movements' positions didn't win, but it allows to enlarge the degree of support. Polarizations and mutual understanding, I think, are also intentions, but could be seen in a dialectic way. So even with a highly emotional topic, having the possibilities to debating them, and in many different, under many different circumstances and conditions, is something that helps mutual understanding. But I agree totally with David that the idea that it is sufficient to find the right argument and the only truth is misleading. On the other hand, it is misleading if we think that all the people arrive with their own embedded interest, that they are not available, willing, or capable of changing in comparison with and interactions with others. Because this is one of the issues which have been also extremely divisive within social movements. Issues of protection of environments or protections of, for instance, employment, or movements active on women's rights and more traditional movements active on other issues. We cannot see them just as clashing with each other. We have also to develop possibilities of interactions, and sometimes you find a way. So I think that we...
But also, I would like to add only that sometimes we understand the word polarization as something extremely bad. I don't think that it's necessarily bad. I mean, of course, if it reaches levels of violence, it's bad. But sometimes it's good to have different positions and to defend the position. You're yes, I'm no, or I'm yes and you know. And the discussion could be good even if we maintain our positions. And we can learn from the process. And that's the role of the state in showing the alternatives to citizens and what it really means. And that's one of the strengths of John Gastill idea of this Oregon Deliberative Forum. It's one of that proposes and clarifies what is seriously asked. That's fantastic. But polarization per se, to have different ideas, come on, it has no negative connotation. Sometimes polarization, as far as it is human, as far as it's civilized, that's fantastic. Actually, it's good. I want debate. I want, something to push my adrenaline, to discuss. Yeah, sure.
So, following that comment, actually, if that leads to a vote at some point, what would you consider a successful referendum? Does the result matter, or are we going to maintain this relativistic moral point of view also at that point? Is it irrelevant what the conclusion is, what people actually voted for, or should we should we just pay attention to the process, or is it also relevant when we defend direct democracy what people actually do with it compared to other kinds of mechanisms, like representative democracy or deliberative democracy? Yeah. Can we be neutral about the results, or are we assuming that majorities are progressive somehow?
No,
I don't think so. Right?
No.
No. Well, I would say that I would start with the idea that most of the critics that we have regarding direct democracy could easily transport to representative democracy. Matters of discussion, matters of public finances, campaigns, everything that we discuss and we are afraid of direct democracy could be easily transported to direct democracy. Now, what counts for a successful referendum? I would say that depends where you stand in that referendum.
No, I'm asking you.
Well, I think that
your opinion on
no,
that.
my opinion is that depending where the actors are in the whole
Okay.
change of the process is what they're gonna say about the success of the referendum. Let's say, if you are really an advocate for that topic that is under consideration, probably the result is extremely important for you. Also, maybe there are some topics that you are not so hard on them, but the process is really important. Even more, sometimes we can even think on situations where you instrumentalize the referendum for a greater goal or a different goal. And this is easily represented in the Radical Party in Italy or the People's Party in Switzerland, that many times they proposed initiatives or referendums against certain laws, knowing from the starting point that they're going to lose. They knew it, even before they started to gather signatures. But they instrumentalized this process because they wanted something else. If they succeed with the gathering of signatures, they're going to be in the press, in the headlines for a while. They're going to be discussing about a topic that probably won't succeed on the ballot box, but then they control the agenda. Let's say the People's Party in Switzerland on minority rights or Schengen agreement or more integration with the European Union, they know that most of them, they're going to lose. Sometimes they win with the minaret, for instance. That's one example, right? Or the Radical Party in Italy. But then, during a while, they capture the whole agenda. And that's a huge victory. So they don't really care about the process. They don't really care about the results because they are almost sure that the result is going to be one and not the other. They control. So depends where you are, the answer. So it could be the result, it could be the quality of the process, the enlightenment of citizens, or as Donatella say, the empowerment or the emancipation of citizens, or maybe how successful you were in order to instrumentalize this institution for another end.
And I would add to this answer two elements. One is it is important for social movements, for instance, that promote or participate in referendums. The results is, of course, important because of this empowering effect. And usually movements want to win because success is also something that triggers other continuations of the movement activities. But first of all, it's not the final moment, because what we have to consider is also that there have been referendums which have been won, but then type of developments, like it was the case in Italy with the water referendums, other actors mobilize in order to empty the results, so to challenge the results in practices. And on the other hand, you can have referendums which are formally lost, like the one in Scotland, lost by the movements that mobilized for independence, but they brought about a sort of compromise later on an enhanced autonomies. So it depends a lot also on what happens later on after the referendums. It's not the final moment. And then it is also true that all what happened during the process is still important. So you can have mobilizations of the people on some issues which bring about further resources for a movement. You define it in terms of instrumentalizing the referendums, but in some cases it could be also referendums as other type of instruments are one among the trials and testing and errors.
And I mentioned two political parties, but environmental groups also instrumentalize this. I have a lot, and then gender move. I mean, many different interests. It could be political parties, unions, NGOs, whatever, might instrumentalize an institution. I think that's something that we should be really aware of. Institutions are important, but also could be manipulated somehow. And it's not a manipulation, it's not even a normatively bad thing to use an institution for improving one's agenda. If you win, space in the headlines and to control the agenda and to make your point of view publicly available for everyone, it's not necessarily bad.
Do you want to add?
Yes. I just wanted to add on this that since the logic of the referendums is sometimes to create very challenging situations based on a few votes. This emerged, for instance, during our research on the Scottish case. An activist said just before the referendums, I'm really scared because this time it could be we win. And winning on a narrow margins is something that is scaring. So I think that in assessing the effect, one has to consider also that very often there are then moves later on towards trying to not really making compromise, but at least avoiding that the polarizations, which I agree is positive, but ends up in a total divisions within the populations.
I have 2 fingers on that.
Okay.
And I agree with her, but I would like to add that how successful or how a failure was the process of a referendum, it really depends on whether you consider that particular referendum a one-shot game or one step in several iterations that you will have in the future. If you put all your weaponry on one-shot game, if you win or if you lose, it's maybe a matter of life and death, blah, blah, blah. But if you know that this game is going to be available and you can play it as many times as you want, the whole perception of the game changes. Yeah. And cooperation, it's much more feasible. And we have a lot of experiments with the prisoner's dilemma. I mean, when you play it once, they kill each other. But after several iterations, there is cooperation. And that's explained different
cooperation among dead? But
no, they survive because they collaborate at the end. So it's absolutely different when you see this, the last resource and that's it, no more, or when you see as an interaction. And that's another point that I wanted to make. In many countries, Switzerland, Uruguay, Slovenia, and others, there is a shared double sovereignty. We elect representatives, and we citizens reserve our el Joker, ¿cómo se dice?
Joker, yeah.
El Joker?
Mm-hmm.
Joker?
Yeah, the Joker.
Okay. We reserve an this window of opportunity in case you are not responsible to my demands, citizens, unions, NGOs, whatever. But in some places that went too far, for instance, in Armenia or Azerbaijan, for instance, what is decided through direct democratic mechanism could not be touched by representatives, which is kind of weird. In Uruguay, we have a huge situation with human rights violators during the military regime. So we vote for an amnesty, and then Congress vote against that amnesty, and then we vote against. And so, it's one step. You move the ship slowly. You can't make it just 100 degrees one way to another. So again, it depends when you see it as an interaction or when you see we have one shot and that's it.
Yeah, and I guess not only for people focused on a specific struggle, but also the question of living in a system where this is possible, or living in a system where this is not possible. So you can even bring it.
Yeah, you don't like it, gather signatures.
Yeah, exactly.
Just, it's
good. So, in connection to this and also the previous questions, what do you think changes in these debates when we introduce digital technology? That's something that I was thinking about when we were talking, because we are assuming. It seems that we are assuming all the time that there are certain dynamics happening, but what if what if all of this happens online? Someone makes a proposal, mobilizes online through social networks, for instance, which also happens, of course, in these cases, but we cannot isolate those two domains in any case. And then people also vote online, but the kinds of incentives they might have to share, to vote, to make proposals might be different. I'm not saying that they are. I'm just asking, what do you think about that? Does it change anything, that the fact that we need to go and vote on a Sunday, or whether we are just clicking at home?
I think it changes a lot. Now, in the campaigns that we studied, social media were used, but they were used together with other forms of interactions, face-to-face, and I think that this was important for the quality of the process, because only relying on digital technologies for all the process tend to introduce all the biases that digital technologies bring with them, and I think that's the direct participation, so going to vote on a Sunday, but also even more being stimulated to debate with the others is essential and cannot happen only online. What digital technologies could do, I'm also thinking about other processes which I started to research now, like so-called crowdsourced constitutional processes. Digital technologies were important during, for instance, the constitutional process in Iceland or in Ireland, because they allowed to broaden the propositions, to improve the communications between the people who participated, that were chosen by sortition, and the other groups of people. But I wouldn't substitute the face-to-face interactions with digital online interaction.
Sure. I tend to agree with her, and even I can go a step further. As far as we have reached in terms of technology, I would say it's important for maybe as a pedagogical dissemination of ideas, but no way voting online. There is no way so far that I can know whether the voter is the voter. Because even you say, oh, we can maintain the secrecy of the vote. Yeah, how? With a code you give me? How if I force you to give me the code and the family? You know, as before with the paperwork, we have a lot of examples of, and that's why in presence, it's very good. Because the secret and universal vote is liberating, and I don't know if secret, that vote, so far, right? So another thing that I want to raise here at this point is that what one of the great Argentinian political scientist, Ernesto Calvo, called the echo chamber. One of the huge risks that we have in the online world is what from another perspective we can call homophily, which is we gather between equals. At the end, our social media, it's composed by people that more or less are like us, more or less think like us, and blah, blah, blah. So we are creating virtual clouds of people that believe and behave more or less the same without any contact with the other sides of society. And that's terrible, it's terrifying. It's terrifying not only because all these algorithms that social media uses, and most of them are impossible to understand, and we don't know how shaped we are by social media, but because we are making a society of ghettos, virtual ghettos, mental ghettos, and I don't like that. So Sunday voting is fantastic, and if the decision was on me, I would say compulsory voting. The wrongly called compulsory voting, which actually doesn't exist in any democracy. What is forced is for you to go to a place to say, hi, I'm here, but you are not forced to vote. So compulsory voting, technically speaking, is not correct term. It's compulsory presence in the voting station once every few years. And I think that's great. It's very Republican, Republican from the Republican tradition of the Republican Party, please. Yes, I think that we should maintain the participation and these Republican pillars that we inherit from these guys, which are great.
I guess the question, the follow-up question to that would be, but then it doesn't matter whether we vote online or not, right? The problems of social networks are still there, and the polarization effects, and I mean,
it's an echo chamber. It multiplies the problem sometimes.
So the problem is something that affects us.
I think you
way.
can say, from the point of view of participation, there is still a digital divide in the capacity of using these techniques and so on, which would balance the advantage in terms of number of people who do not want to work. But I think it's the meaning that is negative, that reduces the importance of the moment. And when we go to vote, the symbol is as important as the instrumental results that we expect from it. And the other element is not only echo chambers, but also the degree of lack of empathy that you have online.
Oh, yeah.
So trolls, aggressive type of behaviors.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I have a final question, but
Yes.
So well, I will raise it. But before you answer, I'm going to open the floor so we can gather more questions. So the final question would be, I'm thinking about well, it happened, of course, before, but in the last midterm elections in the US, for instance, there were lots of referendums happening in many places, many of them at the local level.
Sure.
And since this is a conference about local democracy, we haven't really talked about that. I'm sure some of the questions will be connected to that. But so I guess the question would be, at least in the case of the US, it seems that referendums and citizen initiatives are used at the local level to challenge conservative policies that are implemented at the national level. And progressive policies are implemented because they are approved by referendum, and rights seem to be expanding as a consequence of that. But then, of course, the opposite could also happen. So I wanted to keep that in mind when we talk about the question of scale in direct democracy. Just I guess now it makes sense to also gather a few more questions if people from the public want to intervene. I don't know if there's a question there. ¿Necesitas el...?
No, depende si es francés, sí.
Ya, pero tienes que conectarlo.
No, sí.
Quería compartirles una pequeña experiencia y hacerle una pregunta. La experiencia se genera en una región de Chile, en la 10ª región, cuando ante la comunidad tiene que optar si se crea una nueva municipalidad o no se crea una nueva municipalidad. Cuando se sale a hacer la encuesta inicial por parte de nosotros para entender lo que está ocurriendo, un 75% de la comunidad se manifiesta a favor de la creación de la comunidad. Pero cuando se le pregunta si se siente informado para tomar una decisión, el 90% señala no sentirse informado. Se genera un proceso de información y pasan 4 meses y cuando se lleva a cabo la elección, 75% vota en contra, o sea, se dio exactamente vuelta lo que había dicho la encuesta inicial de lo que ocurrió. 75% vota en contra de la creación. Dos preguntas. Primero, ¿no debería la desinformación ser considerada delito? ¿No debería la desinformación o la información falsa a la que se le tiene a un pueblo o a una comunidad ser un delito? O sea, que se le haya mentido, que se le haya llevado a tomar una opción, siendo que efectivamente no sé si delito, pero falta por lo menos, ¿no? Y la segunda pregunta es, ¿qué tan importante, aparte de todo lo que hemos hablado, es la información para un evento de esta naturaleza?
Maybe, no, we can gather a few. Sí. Si hay otras preguntas.
Si no,
Aquí.
tenemos una, dos, la tuya, Leonel.
Hi, I just have two ideas to it and one question. The first thing is I'm from Dresden, and Dresden is very well known as a very radical and very right-wing city. We love rallies. Everything is, debated on rallies in the streets. So if you are against a bridge, you go to a big rally and motivate your people, and that's it. And then the politicians get, an idea, okay, there are a lot of people against. We don't do the referendum in that case. We just show our feet on the street, and that's how we signal that we are not clear or not going on with that policies. The second thing is, I think also to referendum, we need to think about the scale. If it all comes up with a Swiss, but if we are thinking of in inhabitants, so a referendum just works for, I would say, for smaller groups, or we never had a referendum in Germany because we're so many people, and if you're going to the US, there's such a big, so referendum just ends in no or yes, And I think it's very important to have a culture of discussion upfront the referendum. So my question is about time and culture of a referendum. That means you need a time before, and this goes to the question before. You need some time to debate about it and to wage all the facts for the yes or the no. So that's criteria. Once want to run a referendum, wants to make sure that there are qualitative, explanations about why yes or no. And yes, so that were two parts. What do you think about time? How long should the discussion take place before a referendum? And what quality standards or what culture needs to be involved from parties who wants to do a referendum?
Okay. Yo creo que ya podemos.
Okay, should we briefly answer to these three questions, and then we can gather a few more?
Well, I think that informations are very important, but also that they must be plural, because the right information doesn't exist. It is always point of view. So what has been important in the processes that worked better was to have experts that presented different visions. And this was really very important in order to have high quality type of deliberations. Then, of course, it is another issue how the electors will decide. But information is certainly crucial. About the time of the referendums is important. We had studied referendums that with very different length of campaigns. In some cases, it was a few days. For instance, if you take the referendums which had a heavy symbolic impact in Greece on the vote on austerity politics and the acceptance of the diktat of the Troika, but it was certainly not a positive element in terms of quality of the debate. And I think that we should consider that it is not a single shot type of instruments, so that you can build up knowledge in time. That you need some time for debating. So some months, I think, are a positive element. And the culture, in fact, I think that there was no traditions of referendums in the German this republic, not so much because it is big, but because there were a lot of concerns about the lessons of the Weimar Republic, and always the mistrust for the people that has re-emerged often in the German history. And of course, you need to build cultural conditions for referendums, but I think this is also something that needs to be done in time. What I think is important also about the initial questions is that like not all topics should be open to decisions of elected politicians, but some constitutional fundamental values are to be considered as not challengeable by the parliamentary majority of the day. The same applies also for referendums. So we have to be careful about the fact that not any issues could be put on referendums, and not on emotional moods as it sometimes happens. So I think that's defense of minorities, issues of high moral values are not something that should be easily put on the table as referendums issues. And in fact, many type of institutional asset for referendums define very clearly which topics should be allowed and which not. But as I mentioned, not only for referendums, but also for decisions by parliamentary majority. This is also a principle of liberal democracies, which is important to keep in these times of crisis.
Yeah, I tend to agree to Donatella. I think that our differences are very marginal, actually, which is good.
It's a result of deliberation.
Result of deliberation. Well, I think that both questions that you ask are go through the same avenue, right? There is a huge and crucial step, which is about the process of gathering the signatures and the campaign itself. I'm talking about citizen-initiated mechanisms of direct democracy. I'm not talking about plebiscites as the ones that Donatella mentioned. So if we go to the plebiscitarian world, of course, there are some examples like Santos in Colombia finished a book 3-page long on the agreement with the FARC and settled the vote for 28 days afterwards. There is no way a citizen could read that, understand, and debate to form an idea. That's very plebiscitarian. There was a plebiscite, but it was extremely plebiscitarian in the way that was done. It was a disaster. So the campaign is crucial. Now, when you have citizen-initiated mechanisms of direct democracy, the process of gathering signatures takes a time. I mean, as I mentioned before, it depends where you are, but it could range from 6 months to 1 year, even no limit somehow in some places. So you are aware of what's going on, and then you have a campaign. At least I would say that you need as a campaign as long as you have for regular elections, at least. So let's say that if I have a campaign, a regular election, a regular campaign of 2 months, at least you need 2 months for these questions to be answered in a reasonable way towards, to have an informed decision. So education here is crucial, and the role of the state in guaranteeing that both sides of the topic have a fair and relatively equiparable share of distribution and information, it's crucial, and the state here is a sine qua non characteristic. Regarding the German question, yeah, I agree with Donatella. I mean, I think that in Germany you don't have MDDs at the federal level, not because it is an 80 million inhabitants country, it's because of the Nazi past and the abuse with annexation of Austria and all these ballots that Hitler put forward, which were also informed somehow by the Weimar Republic, which you had a couple of examples that were abused by both extremes. One was to the expropriations, I'm not exactly remember, but it was expropriation of the realeza, of the royalty, the houses and mansions that was put forward by the Communist and Socialist Party, the Social Democrats and the Communists, and then one by the extreme right. I don't remember exactly on the topic, but you had experience at the federal level in Germany. So I think that the post-war federal authorities of Germany were really skeptic about these institutions, at least at the federal level. Now, finally, just one comment on that. It is interesting that after Franco dies and Spain was discussing the whole new architecture, the ones that opposed, there is a fantastic article written by Tati Pindado here in front of me on the discussion on direct democracy. The first one that opposed 100% was the left, was Joan Solà, what's the name? Partido Comunista, but Joan Solà, right? Okay, one of the founding fathers of contemporary modern Spanish, I was saying the Spanish Republic, but it's not a republic, that's right. No.
Magari.
Yeah, okay. Now, regarding your question, whatever. Regarding your question, as I said before, I truly consider citizen-initiated mechanisms of direct democracy as important mechanisms that correct and complement representative democracy. So from my perspective, I think that we can go as far with these mechanisms as long as we have representative institutions. Said in other words, if there is no institutional institutional representation in a lower level, let's say neighborhood, there is no point to have direct democracy at that level because there is nothing to correct. You can only correct something that exists. So, and it comes in the hand with this threatened possibility that CIMDDs have. So if you don't have neighborhood authorities, it has no sense whatsoever to have neighborhood direct democracy because there is nothing to correct. There is no one to threat about a potential referendum or a potential popular initiative. And also, it's extremely I have heard during these 2 days about going local to the neighborhood level even. And I'm not sure how you can define neighborhood. It's where you sleep. It's where you live. It's where you hang out weekends. It's where you work. It's extremely complicated to go as low. So I would say we need a coherent policy framework. Let's say a big city, yeah, I can understand, I can see how it would work, direct democracy in a big city, I mean a city when it has city authorities. But at the neighborhood level, no. I think it's a bad idea.
I would also add about the questions of specific challenges of local referendums, the issues of defining the constituencies, which is always an important issue, but even more at the local level. So thinking about Germany, the struggles in Stuttgart about the reconstructions of the railway stations. And serious issues there is which is the constituencies which should be allowed to vote. But even in other cases, like in the Basque countries, one of the eternal debates is what is the constituencies that should be allowed to vote in case of referendums on independence. Is Navarra part of the constituencies or not? Similarly, also if we think in terms of other territorial regions, and of course this could be applied also at the national level, but there I think it's less serious as it is at the local level, because there exactly externalities are very intense, and it is difficult to say from the normative point of view who should have the right to make decisions.
Yeah, that's another very interesting question, right? How whether referendums or direct democracy should coincide with those affected by decisions or with constituencies. That's something that we cannot discuss now.
No.
But it's a very interesting topic, also in the case of the national level, right? The case of abortions, for instance, is a very common case.
Yes.
So it should be decided only by the women.
No, if you forbid that for happening in one country, it means that people will go and have abortions in the neighborhood countries.
Well, you have the X case in Ireland, which is extremely famous.
Yes, exactly. So it's a really interesting topic in all the levels.
I just wanted to mention that you were asking us regarding direct democracy at the local level in the United States. I would say we have a lot of information regarding direct democracy used at the state level in the United States, but not the local. At the local, we can count it in tens of thousands every year. It's impossible to swallow all this data. But at the state level, yes, there is good data, and not always. I mean, probably today, because we see a very conservative government and there is some sort of reaction, and that's one of the characteristics. Sometimes direct democracy serves to equalize what's going on, to find an equilibrium. And today, but the contemporary modern direct democracy in the United States started with Proposition 13 in California in 1978, where the homeowners decide to vote and to cut the taxes by half. And since then, this measure was copied in several states, which produced a lot of problems in fiscal level in many states, California, Oregon, Washington, etc. So not always we can understand that, of course, that what we decide directly is progressive and liberal and cool. Sometimes we decide terrible things.
In the case of the United States, however, it seems that at least in some occasions and in the current political context, it seems that direct democracy is used to challenge or to deal with the problems of another level of government that is different from the one where you're voting. So it's also it brings another level of complexity to the debate.
Of course.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know, one word. I do believe that citizen initiative mechanisms of direct democracy offer a window of opportunity with a lot of complexities, pros and cons. But I'm pretty sure that the topics that we can arise at the local level doesn't change my life. I mean, the most important things in my life cannot be solved at the local level. And I would say most of the people, I'm talking about education, violence, environment. This cannot be solved at the neighborhood level. You need policies, big policies. You can't solve health system and how much you're gonna live on the neighborhood level or whether violence affects you at the local. Yeah, you can put another policeman or not, but that's not solve the problem. And if we believe that we're gonna solve these huge matters, education, health, and housing at the local level, I would say that we are in an extremely naive position that, no, we shouldn't expect that from direct democracy at the local level.
Okay, that's another enormous debate, I would say. Maybe it's not. I don't know if we have time for that now. So yeah, a few more questions. I don't know where the mics are. Here there's two questions here.
La luz acá está.
Well, I'm ready to enter into that debate with you. I'm a local elected official in the United States, and I ran for office because the state and the federal governments and international institutions are not solving these problems. And the only way we can mobilize and generate new ideas, I believe, is on the local level, because the local level is where people are affected by environmental problems, people are affected by violence. Anyways, but what I really wanted to ask you, both of you, is that, and again, I'm not saying that the problems can be solved at that level, but if we're talking about democratic solutions to, and new creative ideas, coming from places we don't even know because we haven't talked to people yet, I feel like this is how they'll be generated, and they'll be generated through proactive, citizen initiative, direct democracy mechanisms. So I wanted to ask you about not just referendums that say yes or no. The people of Manchester, England today were talking to us about their struggles and challenges dealing with the devolution of their powers and their desire to democratize more, to really invent not just yes or no points, but co-production of policy at the city level. So can you talk about any kind of mechanisms you know of where citizens are actually producing policy to begin with instead of reacting to policy that is already made? Just one little example, in my city we have a committee structure of 100 committees where residents participate in helping develop policy ideas, but their authority is unclear. We don't have a policy framework yet for that. But could you talk a little bit about those kind of mechanisms that governments, local governments might use to avoid the mobs in the streets?
Hello, I'm Thomas from Metz. It's more easy for me to speak in French, so but I want to say thank you for this moment. Yes, yes. C'était justement pour laisser un peu de temps que je commençais en anglais. Donc, je disais merci pour ce moment, comme dit une célèbre ex de président français. Je me posais une question. Alors, peut-être que vous l'avez abordé, j'ai raté le tout début. Et je m'en excuse, mais je me demandais, alors le référendum évidemment paraît une très bonne idée en termes citoyens, en termes de mobilisation des citoyens, mais lorsque le résultat du référendum n'est pas respecté par les dirigeants, que ce soit au niveau local ou au niveau national, est-ce que le risque n'est pas un risque majeur, c'est-à-dire d'avoir des conséquences qui courent sur plusieurs années? Je prends un exemple. En France, le traité constitutionnel européen, la réponse a été négative et cela n'a pas été respecté et on l'a passé par le Parlement. Et je crois que ça fait déjà plus de 10 ans, ça fait 10 ans, il me semble. Et 10 ans après, on ressent encore une défiance généralisée. Et est-ce que ce n'est pas un danger réel pour la démocratie, finalement, cet acte démocratique, cet acte citoyen qu'est le référendum? Est-ce que ça ne se retourne pas? Et est-ce que ça ne détruit pas la démocratie et la confiance, finalement, en créant une défiance généralisée vis-à-vis de toutes les autorités et de tout ce qui représente le champ décisionnel?
D'accord.
Sí.
¿Sí?
Yeah.
¿Respondemos?
Sí, sí.
Okay.
Estamos casi en horario.
Okay. Very briefly.
Yes.
Extremely briefly. Thank you very much for all your questions. Yeah, we can discuss a lot about how much you can solve. I'm the colleague from the United States. You can solve the health problems in the United States, but you won't solve the Obamacare at the local level, at the municipal level. That at the county level, it's impossible. The single-payer system doesn't work at that level. I mean, it's a national, federal thing. So yeah, you can find new ways of incorporating people. And you mentioned when the legislation is already made, but I'm talking about ballot propositions too. You can change. Then there are a lot of experiences. I think this event showed there are a lot of experiences how you can gather citizens together to brainstorming about some ideas through somehow deliberative process, controlled deliberative process in the neighborhoods, etc. But one of the important things about direct democracy is that extremely sharp. And with this, you can cut the bread, but you can cut jugulars, right? I mean, it's a very sharp institution. So we can talk about that a little bit later afterwards. Regarding the French colleague, I 100% agree with you. I couldn't agree more with you in terms that when authorities do not respect results, they are shooting the feet. They're destroying the whole architecture of democracy, right? Again, that was not a referendum. That was a mere plebiscite. It was not called by the citizens. There was no process of citizen initiatives. It was just a process of the authorities of France saying, oh, look, all these guys in Europe push us to ask the people, oh, the result is bad. You know what? Let's bypass you. That's terrible. That's terrible. Not only it was a plebiscite, but also they don't acknowledge the results of the plebiscite. And so that's why I'm so against plebiscites, because that occurs. That occur in Ireland, which was binding, unlike France, because it was not binding. And that's one of the differences. I mean, the authorities, legally speaking, they had the right to do what they did. They could bypass the people because it was not a binding resolution. So, but I agree with you. Technically, more ethically speaking, it's extremely negative.
Yes, I start with the examples on the local level, because I agree with you that the local level could be important to develop new ideas and to experiment with different ideas. And what I've seen in my own research is, for instance, on an issues that you mentioned, health. In Europe, especially in Southern Europe, during the financial crisis, there have been different movements that have addressed the issues of public health and the right to health by introducing mechanisms of participations and interactions between the different actors. So I'm thinking, for instance, about the self-managed clinics in Greece, or the Mareas, the wave in Spain. There have been responses to the crisis, very often articulated also at the local level, with the basic ideas that in order to implement some rights, you cannot rely upon privatization, because that means profits, and this means that the persons and the institutions that have to provide for those rights in reality thinks about it as a business. But it can also not be just top-down, not just be imposed as it was in the past. And this is also an idea that has developed in the referendums against the privatization of water supply. It is, you have to create institutions in which the workers that work on certain type of services, the citizens who are also the users, and the politicians who have to make the decisions could participate and invent new type of solutions. Another areas in which this has been developed is in large movements that is developing in Latin America and in Southern Europe against violence against women. And also there in the non una di meno is the Italian terms for this movement, nunca una más,
Ni una menos.
Ni una menos is in the Spanish versions. These have been very powerful movements that have developed also on local type of initiatives, suggesting ways of developing policies that depart from the subjective experiences and dimensions. So I think that the local level could be important in this process of experimentations. And about the referendums, the other questions, how the complex process of legitimation and delegitimations. I think In fact, when authorities do not recognize the results of a referendums and try to resist against it, it is delegitimizing for the authorities themselves. It is also a lesson for the movements that, as it happens, by the way, also with regular elections, that's not the final point, that's not the final moment. So this is not typical only of referendums, that once they are decided, still others mobilize and continue to mobilize against the decisions. It is sometimes also typical of other types of elections. You elect a party with a certain type of program, but then for various reasons the party is not implementing the program. And I think that this is also one of the lessons that we learn with this research. All these instruments are just one moment within broader processes, before but also after, and the results is never decided once forever in the moment of the referendums or the elections, but it's a step in a longer and more complex process.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. I'm afraid we'll leave it here. It's a very interesting discussion. I'm sure we can continue discussing during dinner. We will be having food and wine in the tent afterwards. There will be heating today, so thank you both.
Thank you.
And see you all in the other tent. Thank you very much.
I think that we disagreed more on the